അവിടുന്ന് മണ്ണിറങ്ങണമെങ്കിൽ എന്നോട് മനസ്സിലേക്കുള്ള
Hey everyone, it's Sam, and welcome back to the 911 Nonsense podcast. To stay in the loop, learn about upcoming guests, and join in the conversations with the Noon community, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And hey, if you like what you hear in this episode, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Your support means the world to us. Sarah is an ICU nurse, critical care educator, and fierce patient advocate. She shares how staying at the bedside keeps her grounded, sharp, and connected to the real challenges nurses face every shift. We talk about going from almost becoming a Spanish teacher to stepping into the ICU during H1N1 and then later COVID-19, the emotional weight of those years, and why confidence in nursing only comes from stepping into hard things. Sarah opens up about advocating for patients when it wasn't popular, protecting her license, and why education should open doors, not close them. Let's get started. Awesome, Sarah. Thank you so much for joining us on the Noon podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm also doing great. I apologize. I do have a little bit of upper respiratory sinusy issue going on today. So I just want to take a minute to say thank you so much for coming on and taking the time. I know you're a busy person. I know that, we all tend to value our time. So I appreciate you coming on and hanging out with me for a couple hours today.
Well, Sam, thank you for inviting me onto your podcast. I really appreciate always having conversations with other people that work in our profession. I think it's a great thing that we're able to do and just amplify each other's voices and help each other out in this profession. So I'm very thankful to be on it as well.
I really like that you said that we amplify each other's voices. That is such an important thing to understand, right? Not just our voices, but we want to amplify like everything, right? Like the healthcare system right now is in such a bad state that having little outlets like this, I think, are helping, even if it's only just a little bit, right, of a reprieve for people. So thanks for coming out and thanks for doing what you do. Can I go ahead and get a quick introduction of what you do, who you are, and why you do it?
Sure. So my name is Sarah Vance, and I'm an ICU nurse as well as a critical care nurse educator. So I think a lot of people see my platform and think that I only do education, but I still am at the bedside. Not a full time anymore, but I still definitely am in the trenches. I think that's really important for me as an educator to still be in it. I stepped away from my formal education role at a hospital to basically start my company, which is ICU Nurse, where I focus on critical care nurse education to help the next generation of nurses to really just understand the concepts that we talk about and make them click really easily. I also do some consulting for some companies and help them get a perspective from a nurse's perspective. I think that's incredibly important for people that are developing things that we work with all the time at the bedside. Like, we know we're going to know the product best. You know what I mean? So I work with those individuals. And then, of course, I do some writing for I'm published in a few areas. And then I also travel around the country and speak and teach, which I really love to do. I love to meet other people that in normal situations I wouldn't be able to meet. So it's really fun. But yeah, I'm an educator by heart. Been doing that formally for the last 6 years. But in all honesty, as we kind of know, everyone is an informal educator when you get into healthcare. Like, you kind of just continue to pass that information on that you learn to each other, and we feed off of each other, and then of course help other individuals grow if they are new. So that really is my big passion.
I can tell you're very passionate about it. One thing that you stated was that it's very important for you as an educator to still stay in the trenches. Why do you think that that's important?
Well, I'll give you a little bit of a story that made me kind of, it gave me a perspective that I was like, I don't want to be like this. So when I was in my formal education position, this was right around the tail end of COVID, because I transitioned from being a travel nurse into an educator role at that time. And, I was saying to this individual who was in a leadership position, I said, we really need to be concerned about our staffing. This is the reason why, we're having all these issues. We're having high turnover. We're not having retention. We're not able to provide, the care that we all know that we want to provide. It's difficult at this time because of our staffing crisis. And the individual looked at me. I can remember it clear as day. And they said, "You're just too close to the bedside." And when I heard that, I was like, I never want to become that person. I became a nurse to help people. And that has never changed for me, regardless of which role and which area, because I've been kind of in a few different positions. That's always the root of who I am, is to help my patients and to improve the care that we're providing them or help them pass on to the next world. When I transition to an educator role, yes, my primary focus is the nurses that are caring for those patients, but at the end of the day, it still goes back to those patients. Being an educator, you're able to capture a larger net of people that are going to impact the patients that we care for. And it really is rooted in improving patient outcomes and having nurses feel confident and be competent to care for these patients to impact that. So, that to me, that statement really just kind of hit me where I was like, I don't want to lose sight of this. And one thing that I always said to myself when I was a younger nurse, I said, if I ever lose sight of my purpose or my integrity, I know it's time to go. So for me, I think it's important to stay in the trenches because I still love to take care of people. Like, that hasn't changed either. I think that people, that I'm entering into my 17th year of being a nurse, all of which I started out as an ICU nurse in 2009. So I've always loved taking care of people, and that has never changed. I think some people do, that's true, that they get to the point where they're so burnt out that they have to step away and their care it doesn't change. It's just not as passionate as it was. But at the end of the day, I love taking care of people. I love taking care of my patients. I love being an ICU nurse. So not only is it still allowing me to stay rooted into my very personal why and what I love to do, which is care for individuals, but it also makes me a better educator. I think that it can be difficult if you're so far away and you're not really understanding the struggles. That's one. Like, if I don't understand the barriers that other nurses are going through, how can I educate, or how can I have them trust me? How can I resonate with them? It's going to be very difficult. Like, when my platform is ICU nurse, and there is very big intention behind why I spelled it the way I did. It's not ICU with a C. It is ICU as in visual see you, because that is really what it's about. Like, I truly do see you. A lot of the struggles that we've been through, I've been through. A lot of the challenges I've experienced. A lot of the hardships, I've been there. But I've also been through those times where we celebrate stuff. I've been through the successes. I've been through all of it. And so I think it's important to make me a great educator. And it also helps me stay rooted into my passion. So I know that was a long-winded explanation, but obviously I feel very strongly about it. So.
You do. And you know what? I love long-winded explanations. I think that's great. And it really truly does show that you're very passionate about it. One of the things that you said was that you want to make new nurses confident and competent. Do you think that you can have a good nurse that is either one of those individually, or do you think that they require to have both skills to be a good nurse? Or practitioner, clinician, provider, whatever?
I think that you can be clinically competent and understand the steps that you need to take, but not feel confident in those steps. I think that confidence and clinical competence is a forever evolving thing. And both of those things will wax and wane depending on where you are in your career. For example, there was one time that, I was 9 years in or something working in ICU. I mean, I was charge nurse. I was experienced, right? And I decided to work in the cardiac cath lab. When I worked in the cardiac cath lab, all that confidence and my clinical competence definitely took a hit because it was a new environment and I was uncomfortable. So I think that they're not isolated, but they definitely do develop with each other. I think the more clinically competent you become, your confidence is what actually shows up. I think the idea of confidence, I have a different take on it. I think it's a matter of developing your clinical competence, recognizing the patterns that we see, and continuing to move forward, even if you're not completely comfortable, but because you know where those resources are to then reach out. You know what I mean? I think confidence isn't something that's just going to magically happen. It's something that comes from doing the things that are slightly uncomfortable in a very safe fashion that you know that, okay, I've never taken care of this patient with CRT before. I've had the class, I had my hours with my preceptor, but this is my first time and maybe I'm not completely confident. The way you're going to build that confidence is by doing it. And when you feel like, ooh, I'm not sure about this, you reach out to your resource, whoever that may be or whatever it may be, to assist you in those situations. So you kind of have to, they go hand in hand, but they also wax and wane.
Sure. No, great explanation. Is nursing something you'd always thought about doing?
No, as a matter of fact. So my very first, when I went to college, I actually had planned to become a Spanish teacher, which I think is funny because here I am as an educator, but my initial intent was to become a Spanish teacher. And I'm not really sure, I don't remember like what happened to shift me into medicine. But I've always been a science nerd from like a child. My mom apparently said that I wanted to be a doctor forever. And so I thought about becoming a physician, but I was like, I don't want to do all that school. I mean, you're like what, 19, and I'm like, I don't want to do all that school. Like, I want to live my life. I don't want to be in school forever because I knew that I would want to work in like critical care for some reason. I don't know why. But I was just like, I'm not going to do it. So I'll become a nurse and I'll become a nurse practitioner. And then I was like, well, maybe I'll become a nurse and I'll become a flight nurse. And so that was the path that kind of shifted me into where I am today. So I actually got into the ICU because I wanted to be a flight nurse. But unfortunately, I have terrible motion sickness. And I just think that it would have not been good for me. And on top of that, I honestly just loved the environment that I was in ICU, and I just fell in love with it. So yeah, no, that was not my initial intent. I was going to be a Spanish teacher, but look, it's like I blended both worlds. I'm an educator, and I'm in medicine, so it's fine.
There you go. And do you speak a lot of Spanish?
Oh my gosh, I was like in advanced practice or whatever AP classes. Like I tested out of it, and then I was like, I probably have a minor, but not really. I was good at Spanish. And let me tell you, it's one of those things where if you don't use it, you definitely lose it. And I have been toying with the idea of starting to study on my own because I'm like, it would be so useful. You know what I mean? Like, I think it would come back very easily just because I did it for so long. And if I read something, I'm like, oh, yeah, I know what that says. But as far as like speaking it, it would probably not be very well. But I've toyed with the idea of dabbling in it again.
Working on the ambulance here in New Mexico, you pick up a little bit of like medical Spanish, right? So like, se habla poquito español. ¿Tienes dolor? Dolor
Yeah.
aquí en tu estómago, en tu pecho, en tu cabeza? Like, very little amount. And then they're like, oh, okay, she does speak a little bit of Spanish.
Yeah.
I'm going to start going off on everything, and I'm going to sit there and look at you like, oh, no.
Exactly. But I think it definitely would be helpful, I think, overall. But so, yeah.
No, for sure. That's great. Do you have any family in medicine at all?
No, not at all. I'm actually one of the first individuals to go to college in my family.
Oh, that's fantastic. Good job.
Thank
That's
you.
awesome. That can be daunting.
Yes. Yes, it is. It's yeah, I like I said, I'm the one of the very first that went to college, and now my niece is actually going into medicine. She's going to be a radiologist. So, you kind of set that path. But it's always interesting. I kind of had this conversation with somebody the other day. I'm like, I wonder what it would have been like if I did come from a family that did go to college. Like I wonder if, because the bar is different in my opinion. And I could totally be wrong, but it's like I went to college and got a nursing degree like that. And I'm not like that is a big deal, but I'm like, maybe I would have felt more to go into be a physician, like I don't know. You just never really know. But regardless, I'm very happy with my decision and I'm very proud of my decision. So yeah.
I get what you're saying though. Like I am the first in my family to graduate from college as well. And it does, I get what you're saying also, like there was no pressure or motivation to go any further, right? Like they're proud of the accomplishments that you received. You're proud of the accomplishments, but what if you could have gone further? Honestly, I'm glad I didn't occur any more student debt than I did going
Me
into
too.
medical school.
Again, that's why I initially was like, I'm not going to, because I also, I was responsible for paying all of my college. So, one of my main goals is that I did not want to be in debt. And that is definitely something that I have not had to navigate as an adult. And I've really am happy that I have not had to navigate that as an adult, because sometimes I hear people and I'm like, that is a lot of money. So, but I worked through college my entire time, and it was a struggle, obviously, to support myself through college and buying my own house at a very young age. It was a struggle, but I'm very proud, and it has definitely made me who I am today for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm curious to hear your opinion, and if you don't want to share it, that's completely fine too. But there were a lot of nurses that were up in arms over the professional title versus non-professional title that was just rolled out. What do you think about that?
Well, I think that this is a very layered conversation that is um, nuanced. I think that taking away the access to individuals in order to obtain and further their profession is absolutely detrimental to our profession and to the patients that we care for. The reality is that there are individuals, or individuals should have access to further the education, and we should want that. We should want individuals, regardless of their ability to pay up front, or have the find the means elsewhere to come in. I mean, just imagine how many brilliant human beings we may potentially be limiting because of that, and how that can absolutely impact the patients that we care for. Um, you know, when it comes to access, that is a privilege. And not all individuals have that privilege, just like myself. I didn't have that privilege. I had to pay for school out of pocket. I had one very tiny little scholarship, and sure, I could have taken loans. Um, and I did take a very small loan, but I just imagine moving forward and not being able to obtain a loan. And this is again for further, you're furthering your profession. So it's like your masters, your CRNAs, things like that, graduate programs. But again, I think it's a very poor decision. Um, we will absolutely contribute to issues with our patients because of limiting individuals. There are brilliant human beings that deserve and should be able to take care of the patients we care for and have access to that. And if we are limiting them just because they are not able to have a loan, I think that that is wild.
That is pretty crazy. I feel like we're already so short in the medical professional area. Like we're so short staffed. I think even for the people who didn't understand what that meant, taking out the professional title was a huge blow to the nursing field, right? Like, if you're just watching it and you see all of these nurses blow up, it's like, well, you're just taking away that title without actually understanding what's going on behind. We are limiting, so we can't allow more people. That's going to shut down a lot of people from continuing that education, like you said, where in the position that I work, we use NPs, we use PAs in our ED. They function as providers in our ED, where it's already very hard to get into these positions. Now we're making it another step harder. And that can be unfortunate for a lot of people. I agree with what you said.
Well, like I said, it's also incredibly nuanced when you take a look at um, socioeconomic status and how that's influenced with things such as race. And it's a real deal. It's discriminatory to limit individuals that deserve to be there and that are absolutely needed in our profession.
Yeah, I agree 100%. A little before we started, you had talked about how we discussed the pandemic, and you talked about how you had been in a minor pandemic prior to COVID-19. Do you feel comfortable discussing a little bit about H1N1 versus
Sure.
COVID-19?
Yeah. So, like I said, I started out as a new grad ICU nurse in 2009, and that's when H1N1, the flu, was running rampant. And it was incredibly challenging at the time to come into healthcare then. So let's separate from pandemic, okay? I'm not because we can't compare the two. But at that time in 2009, before we knew about COVID, it was incredibly hard. And I walked in at the peak of it. So all of my patients were in severe respiratory failure. I got very good at understanding sepsis, ARDS, and proning patients. I mean, it was like my bread and butter because I worked in the MICU. So, and the patients were incredibly sick. I mean, I remember taking care of a patient who was pregnant on the vent, and it was wild to watch. So I learned very quickly. It was very stressful. I think that starting out as a new grad ICU nurse is stressful in and of itself, but you add that layer of acuity to it, and it just compounded everything. And my preceptor was absolutely amazing, but her expectations were very high. And I now, of course, hindsight's 2020. I thank her every single year on Nurses Week because she truly set the foundation for me to be a successful ICU nurse because of having those expectations and holding me accountable and being a little hard on me, being a little tough. And nonetheless, so that was H1N1. It was super difficult. If we fast forward to the pandemic, it started when I was working in the cardiac cath lab. So here I was as a new cath lab nurse, and what they shut the lab down. Like, no elective cases, only STEMIs were coming in. I remember the first patient that we took care of that may have potentially had COVID. I had the full on, bunny suit and everything, and I was terrified. And shortly after that, we also had a patient that needed to be cardioverted. So we did some of our cardioversions in the lab, and the patient came down and they just didn't look good. I was like, something's not right with their respiratory status. Like, I don't think that we should, do conscious sedation on this patient and do a TEE on them and then try to cardiovert them. Like, I think this is not a good option. And sure enough, the patient decompensated, and we ended up having to do emergent intubation, took them up to ICU, and I later found out that it was because they had COVID. So the lab shut down, and our cases went to like nothing. So they actually, at the hospital that I was working at, did not decide to move us to another area yet because it's still kind of early on. So we were just there for STEMI because you had to be in the hospital if there was going to be a STEMI. So we're just there kind of making sure the lab was as clean as it could ever be in its entire life. You could have eaten off the floor, literally. But, I'm watching the news and I'm seeing what's happening in Washington. I'm seeing what's happening in New York and just around the country. And I'm like, felt this pull. I said to myself, this is what I know. This is like, I'm a born and raised MICU girl who grew up understanding respiratory failure and proning patients and ARDS, which, COVID and ARDS are two different things, but at the time we didn't know a lot of information about it. So I felt this big calling to go help, in addition to the fact that I felt something in me to want to help the profession, because I know that we needed it. Like, it was bad, as we all know. So I took a travel contract. Initially, I was going to plan to go to New York. I actually bought my little respirator, which I still have, and it's in the package because I never went. And I'm very thankful that I didn't because I know some individuals that did go, and it has completely changed them in a very difficult way. Now, when I went to my travel assignment, it also changed me. I think anybody that worked probably during the pandemic in either anywhere really, I think that it probably to some degree has probably changed all of us. But the pandemic, being in the ICU, was on another level. I never expected to see what I saw or experience, and I don't think that I have fully processed all of it. Like, we all know that The Pit is out. It's a very popular show right now. I cannot bring myself to watch it because I think that it would be too triggering for me to witness it and to also be seen for some reason, to like have it be so vulnerable. It just feels very vulnerable for me. But it was wild. I had a 48-hour contract, and I by the end of it in completion, I was a shell of a human being. And then once my contract was over, I decided to take an educator position at that facility again because I was like, I need to help. Like, I need to help. We had a bunch of new nurses come in all at once, and I was like, I need to help these new nurses learn how to navigate this. And so when I stepped into the educator role, the pandemic was still happening, and here we had these new ICU nurses in a pandemic, and it was a very interesting position to be in, knowing that I was similar to them when I started, but it was on level 10.
One of the things that there's a couple of markers that I want to talk about. One of the things that you had said is that you would be very uncomfortable being seen because the pit makes it, and I think what you mean by that is that it's showing our true side, our true healthcare side, and it's showing the emotional side of healthcare, which I've not watched the pit either. I've heard a lot of really good things. I have opted to not watch that for different reasons, but I'm curious to hear why you're uncomfortable with potentially being vulnerable in that state.
Sure. So I haven't completely understood it myself yet, but because I did turn it on for about like 5 minutes and I was like, nah, we got to change this. I think what I mean by being seen is that I feel like for so long, our profession never was really shown the realities of our profession. Like, shows tried to capture it, but they did a very poor job of capturing the realities of what we go through.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the pit does a good job, from what I know and from the brief amount of moments that I saw, has executed capturing the realities of what we do, the hardships of what we do. And it almost feels like, wow, you see us, you know, like, we are a profession that I think a lot of people simply just don't actually really get unless you're in it. I just spoke on Tuesday at a conference, and it was for non-clinical individuals, and I was walking them through a day in the life of being an ICU nurse, and I had countless people come up to me afterwards and simply said, I had no idea. And because it's true, they don't. The general public is very protected from, rightly so, from the realities of healthcare. And I think for me, being seen was just having it almost be like, wow, like, you actually see it now. Like, you can actually capture that. And it just feels, I don't know what the feeling is yet. I can't name it.
Do you think that it would be a bad thing for us to be seen, though, like ultimately over in the entire world?
No, I think that it's incredibly needed because I don't think that people really do get it. Maybe it can help with some of the issues that we deal with. If people really understood what we go through on a day-to-day basis, the struggles, um, the lack of resources, the abuse that we see, the lack of support, staffing, how much we truly do fight for patients, and how in it we are, and how much our heart and our soul is in it when we clock in for our shifts. Like you kind of mentioned earlier, prior to recording is that sometimes people just think that we're like robots, but there's such a humanness to every single one of us. And I think that if people understood that, maybe it may help. I don't know. But I think that it cannot harm people to know the realities of what we deal with on a day-to-day basis.
I agree. 100%. Thank you for sharing that. Um, one of the other things that you had mentioned was that the friends that you had that went to New York absolutely changed them. Why do you think that it was New York? Like, I know that, right, everybody changed because of COVID-19 and that pandemic, but why do you think specifically New York was different over everywhere else?
Well, they were the epicenter, right? They had more people dying than anywhere else. The volume that they had to manage was not like where I was. Maybe Washington had it, maybe places in Texas had it, but you know, the volume that they had and the individuals, the community that they served, I think is what really compounded it for individuals there. Plus, many of these contracts, people were working 60 hours a week, they were working 6 days a week. 6 days a week. I was working 48 and I was seeing death upon death upon death upon death upon death. Let alone, and I was a shell, let alone add 2 more days of that. I don't know. I think that how could you not have it impact you?
Right. And that population is so high in New York, right? It's so dense. Yeah, oof, that was rough. Pandemic was rough. I know you're an educator, so I'm going to ask you an education question. Can you explain the benefits of being prone and like for these respiratory sick people? And can you explain it to a very simple level?
Sure. So, when it comes to gas exchange, right? Actual oxygen diffusing over into the blood, so then the blood can carry that oxygen to the tissues. We want that, right? Without the tissues having oxygen, tissues as in our organs, then we have organ failure, death, all the things. So, in order to have appropriate gas exchange at the lung area, it takes both perfusion and ventilation oxygenation. Okay. All those things combined. So we have the lung component and we also have the perfusion component to participate in gas exchange to then travel to the organs and tissues. When a patient has something like ARDS, they have issues, of course, with their lungs, so not ventilating well. And they have issues with that gas exchange happening at the alveolar capillary level. So we have a ventilation perfusion mismatch, is what it's called. When we are sitting up in a supine position, perfusion is going to be better in the lung fields that are more at the base. Okay. But ventilation is going to be better at the lung fields that are not at the base. And the lung fields that are at the base are not being ventilated very well. So we have non-ventilated, poor lung tissue that's getting the most perfusion. So when we put someone onto their stomach, it essentially helps balance that out. So we are able to have the poorly ventilated lung tissue be ventilated better, and the ventilated lung tissue that initially was good is not going to be as extended as it was in the supine position, because that overextension is also harmful to the lung tissue that's already damaged. So that helps from the ventilation standpoint. And then our perfusion becomes more balanced as well. So it helps with that mismatch that we see, where we have better ventilation and thus better oxygenation to our tissues. Now, that's one major component of it. Of course, the other component is the fact that, has better drainage for secretions, that it can help decrease the afterload for the right ventricle, which there are many reasons why the right ventricle can be under stress with ARDS, not only from significant hypoxic vasoconstriction that happens in the lungs, diffuse hypoxic vasoconstriction, but because we put these patients on invasive mechanical ventilation, that pressure that's in the lungs is going to basically be transmitted, if you will, into how it impacts the heart, putting more pressure on the right ventricle. And the right ventricle is very sensitive to changes in afterload. It doesn't do well with it. So that's why very bad cases of ARDS can actually have right ventricular failure and right ventricular dysfunction. So when we put people on their belly, it can help with that as well. And then, of course, the ventilation standpoint is improved because we have all these organs, your heart and your mediastinum organs, as well as your abdominal organs, that are putting pressure onto the lungs. And when we flip you on your belly, it's kind of letting that pressure come off of it so they have better expansion. So there's multiple reasons as to how it can benefit those patients.
Awesome. I appreciate you. I know I told you it wasn't going to be a non-educational podcast, so I appreciate you explaining that.
Oh, no, my pleasure. I mean, ARDS is like, I love talking about it.
It's a tough subject. Have you seen, this is a really cool study, and I know I talk about it a lot, but there's a study right now that they're doing in another country, and I can't remember exactly what it is, so I'm not going to say it. But they're doing studies where they give people oxygen through their rectum via, like, it's a liquid form of oxygen. I saw you laugh. It's a liquid form of oxygen, right? It can't be liquid oxygen, but it is a liquid form of oxygen where they're finding that they're oxygenating people significantly better when they have issues with their lungs.
So I have not read the study, but I know of the study because somebody, of course, this comes out and people are like, "Oh my gosh, look at this!" This is wild. But that's pretty much all that I know about it. Is that there was a study that was out, and I'm not sure the details or anything else of it. But that's quite interesting, for sure.
Could you imagine if in like 5 or 10 years we're oxygenating people through their rectum to make them, like, to heal them better?
At this point, almost anything is possible because back in the day, forever and ever ago, I'm sure that if you said, yeah, we can cannulate somebody and basically take over their heart, which, on ECMO, people would be like, no, yeah, they can just walk around and pretty much, we're taking over their heart and their lungs. Or the same with like an LVAD, like, yeah, I mean, they'll have perfusion, but they don't have really a pulse, like I'm sure if people thought about that stuff, they would be like, that's not true. So who really knows? But you know what? You know what you need in order for those studies to really figure it out? You need funding and you need research and you need science. So that's obviously we need to continue to advocate for those things to occur.
Yes, very true. LVADs are one of my favorite things. I love LVADs so much. I think they're one of, probably, if not for me personally, one of the top coolest things that's come out in the last, they've been out for a while, but like to the point where they're so portable is such a cool thing.
It is very cool. I mean, you think about how much you're giving that individual to continue to live their life while they're, waiting to be bridged to a transplant. I mean, that's a big deal for these people.
Right. I mean, we give them the ability to go long term, even with LVAD. So they can go, could be quite the long bridge from LVAD insertion to that heart transplant, which is also, or end of life care, right? I've seen it used in that way too, where it's like there's no plan for a transplant and it's just quality of life.
Yep. I mean, think about how much time you're allowing that patient to have.
Yes.
It's wild. It's wild.
I love new technology. And I really am curious to see if we do end up oxygenating people through their rectum in a few years from now. I think
Who knows?
Dude, well, like we could overcome so many things if we could bypass the lungs, right? Heart is still functioning. We might have some hypertrophy in that right ventricle, but the pump is still working, right? The pipes are still working and we can bypass the lungs. I think that's just such a cool thing.
It is cool. I just wonder, as with anything, there's always going to be like, okay, these are the complications because of that. So I'm curious as to what those potential complications could be. Who knows?
Yeah. Uh, that could lead you down some rabbit holes for sure. um, do you feel comfortable sharing like maybe one of your hardest patients or maybe one of the worst times that you've had as a nurse, not necessarily as an educator, but as a nurse on the floor?
There's with, over 16 years of being in ICU, there are so many patients that I'm like, which one is the worst? I know that sounds terrible, but it's the truth. I'm like, which one is it? Um, there are two situations that kind of pop out to me. So the first one was during COVID. I had this patient who was young. I think they were in their, I want to say late 30s, early 40s, maybe. That's young to me.
That is young. It's young to me as
Young in
well.
healthcare. Yeah, young in healthcare. So, um, this patient came down, and we found out that they were a single parent to a very young child. So, of course, we know that when they come down to the ICU, when we put patients on the vent, their likelihood of coming off the vent is pretty slim. So we eventually got to the point with this patient that we had to we had to do that. And it was, this is what we had to do in order to give them a potential opportunity to continue to survive. So we put this patient on the vent, and they had a pretty high BMI, and we proned them, and we proned them for a very long time. It got to the point where we couldn't even turn their neck without them going into some type of arrhythmia, like SVT. I remember I walked in and night shift was like, we haven't even been able to turn his head because they just go into SVT. For some reason, we checked the line placement. We thought maybe, is it their central line? Nope, wasn't the central line. In addition to that, their SATs at this point, there are two SATs, had been in the high 50s for like hours and hours. I would say more than 12 hours. Easily more than 12 hours. And their head was completely purple. And of course, there are some reasons, that is like, well, could it be this? Could it be that? We couldn't do any additional testing on them. Like, we couldn't. They were too sick to take them to CT scan. Like, we couldn't do the things, right? So eventually I remember coming in, and I was on day shift, took over from night shift, and they were like, they had a bowel movement, and it was, very hard for the patient. Luckily they're still here, but we did the best that we could because we can't really turn them as adequately as we would like to because they just decompensate that bad. Like, okay. And I just had a gut feeling. I was like, the SATs had been in the 50s. I was like, this is going to be the day. This is going to be the day. So sure enough, the patient ended up going into an arrest, still proned. We ended up doing CPR in the prone position. And I ended up having to lead that code for a decent amount of time because the provider at the time, I don't know where they were. And so eventually they show up, and that's a whole nother story, but eventually they show up. And I remember them being at a prone patient that had been prone for days, very edematous, at the pedal pulse and saying, I feel a pulse. I palpate a pulse. And I'm like, there's no way that you palpate a pulse in this person's pedal pulse. So, of course, we're like, get a Doppler, all the things, blah, 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 like all the things, right? And I'm like, talking to this provider, I'm like, this is futile. Like, that, right? Like, this patient's been hypoxic for days. We have coded them for a very long time. Like, what are we causing more damage to this patient? And I just remember like us going back and forth, and they were very focused on the fact that they had a child, which I totally understood. I'm like, I understand that. I get that. Like, I do. But right now in this situation, we need to think about our patient, like our specific patient. Like, I feel like we exhausted all measures for this patient. And eventually we did end up calling the code. And it was just a very, very hard code for many, many, many reasons. And, after an arrest, everyone kind of, and after an arrest and you call the arrest and the patient dies, everyone kind of scatters, right? They got their own patients that they had to take care of. And I remember just being in full COVID gear with my patient, and I just shut the curtain, and I just sat on the floor and cried. And I just will never forget that situation because it was just tough in so many ways. So that was one. That was not good. This other one is good. It was tough, but it was good. So I come into work and I'm assigned two patients. One of them, I'm assigned two patients, and during huddle, they said that this one is on continuous renal replacement therapy, CRT, but they're coming off right now, so they won't be. So that's why I gave you two, because typically CRTs should be one nurse to one patient. I said, okay. So I get report on the non-CRT patient, and they're sick. Like, they got a lot going on with them. They need blood. We're doing all the things. Like, they are sick. And then I come over to get report on this other patient who the CRT is not quite rinsed back yet. Like, they hadn't started to take it down, night shifted, but they were going to. That was the plan. But after I get report on this patient, I'm like, there's no way we can come off this CRT. I was like, this patient is still very acidotic. They are on multiple vasoactive medications, and just no, like, this is not appropriate. And it was the trauma patient who had some pretty significant injuries. Like, cards were not in their favor, but they were young. So regardless, I'll advocate for my patients regardless of their age. Let me just clear that up. But I say that they're young because that's a pro for them. So I go to my charge nurse and I say, hey, I really don't think we can stop this CRT on this patient. Like, if we stop this, they're going to die. Like, they will die if we stop CRT. I have a call in for nephrology, and I'm going to call the trauma attending. And my charge nurse pretty much just said, no, you're going to rinse it back. And I said, no, I'm not going to do that. And she said, the labs aren't even that bad. Without fully looking at the big picture. And I said, what is the issue? I said, is the issue that we don't have staff? And they said, yeah, it's because we don't have staff. And I said, that is unacceptable to me. I said, that does not matter. I said, you need to figure this out. I'm not rinsing this out. And it ended up in one of the most heated conversations that I've had in my career. So I already knew what I was going to do. I'm not rinsing this patient back because they will die. So I call the head person of trauma. I called them. I said, this is what's going on. And they said, absolutely not. This patient needs to stay on the CRT. I said, oh, no. So I ended up having to, because we didn't have staff, I was running back and forth between these two very sick patients for a brief amount of time. And it was not okay. I called out all the red flags to every senior person was aware of the situation, and I said it needs to be fixed. So eventually it got fixed, and I was able to just take care of my one patient who sure as heck needed the CRT. We ended up doing a emergent bedside lap on the patient and removed part of their necrotic bowel because they were so acidotic, and that's probably what was causing the acidosis. They were on, like, literally, I think I counted 16 infusions. Neurostatus was not looking good. Long story short, the patient survived. He ended up, see, I'm going to get emotional. They ended up coming back many months later, actually. And it wasn't my patient, but I ended up, like, answering a call light. And I looked at the patient. And I was like, this person looks familiar. They came back to get their like I think it was an ileostomy reversed,
Wow.
completely with it, neurologically intact. Like this patient had everything going against them and they survived. And I just fear that if I didn't advocate, I just don't know what would have happened. So yeah, that is something that will forever stay with me.
How did you feel after you recognized that patient?
The first time, like when I was getting report, oh, or you mean like the second time when they came back?
Yeah, when they came back.
I got very, very emotional because there was more to it than just that patient. And there was just a lot of good. But I got super emotional, and I will tell you that the charge nurse at the time, I did not. We had a lot of friction for months after that, and I finally sat down after a while, and I said we need to talk about this situation. But I ended up messaging the charge nurse they had left the facility, and I said, I just want to let you know this person came back and they survived, because we were on good terms at that point. Like
Mm-hmm.
we worked it out. It took me a long time to forgive them though, but yeah, it felt great. Like it was just like you don't get to you don't get to see that as often as you wish you would like to see in critical care. Our patients leave the unit and we're kind of just like, we don't know what happened. Like we don't know. And then the stuff that we do know is usually not great. So if you get a patient that comes back to see you, or they come back in a situation like that, it's very much like, okay. But that specific situation, I literally fought for this patient so hard, like really hard. And I don't know what would have happened to them. I mean, I know what would have happened to them, and who knows what the outcome would have been to that. But I did prevent that step from occurring.
That's awesome. And I really do appreciate that you shared the worst one and then shared what I think is one of your best ones. Like, there's a great way to bridge that. And I'm really sorry that you had to go through the experience that you did in the first one. I am grateful that it was you because I don't know very many people that would have taken the opportunity to feel that emotional with that patient in that room, right? And whether they were there or not to recognize it doesn't matter. You were still able to express how you felt in that moment, sharing that with that patient. And I think that talks leaps and bounds to your character. Um, I really do feel like when clinicians get burnt out, it's because of how much we're having to fight for our patients. It's not necessarily always that we're seeing, hateful people or people that are abusing us or all of that. And I do think that a huge part of it is the amount that we fight for the people that we're treating. And I could see how that would be exhausting. And I can tell that it took a mental toll on you. So thank you for doing that, even though it was probably very hard and it sounds like it caused a lot of strain. Maybe not just necessarily with the supervisor, but maybe the department altogether when you're including, the higher ups too. I'm sure the resident wasn't happy that you went above the resident, but sometimes we have to do those things. And I just hope that everybody that was involved in that situation took that as a learning opportunity and not as a hurt pride problem. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think when it comes to advocating for your patients, at least for me, how can I say this? Other people's feelings are not my top priority when I'm trying to save someone's life. It's just not. That's just the reality. I will be professional, of course. I will say that I dipped into being not professional in this situation because it was to that degree where I was like, I am not being heard. Like this is going to kill the patient. But you know, my top priority is to protect my patient and help my patient and protect myself also. I've been in situations where I had to protect my license, and, you know, some people may not have been happy with me not doing X, Y, and Z. But at the end of the day, that if I can go home and lay down in my bed at night knowing that I did the best of my ability with the resources I have available to me and that I really tried, then that's going to give me peace. I never want to be in a situation where I was like, well, what if I did that? I mean, yeah, we all have those situations, right? It was like, what if this, what if that? But when it comes to trying and like advocating, that is something that I don't play about.
Good. That's good to hear. I want to give you, Sarah, the opportunity to talk about anything that you want to talk about that you feel that we didn't discuss in this conversation, to shout anybody out, and then to let us know where we can find you.
Sure. Oh man, what to talk about? I do just want to say one thing. When it comes to expressing emotion as a critical care nurse, when I was younger in my career, I definitely did not do that. And I learned how that affected me by not doing those things. I think that we need to process in some way. So, whatever way that you find to process, find it and figure it out. Burnout is not a matter of will it happen, it's a matter of when. And we should have a plan in place and be proactive about those situations. We that work in healthcare see some stuff and we're exposed to a lot of stuff and we have our own challenges just in the profession outside of, the actual cases that we care for. So it's really important that you find some way to process what you see. It took me a very long time to be okay with expressing my feelings while I was at work, but I give space to those feelings for an allotted amount of time. I let it move through me because feelings truly are, emotions are movement. They need to move. And then I continue to do what I need to do. And I've also done that for other people when they've been escalated. I'm like, you need to go take a walk. And I got your assignment, but you need to take a walk and walk it out, because we have to then be able to snap back into it and think clearly. And for me personally, if my emotions are still very fueled, it hinders my performance to a degree. So I have to process those. But yeah, I guess one thing I would say is just find your process to be able to work through those feelings, whatever it may be. Everybody's different. Let's see. As far as shout outs, there are a group of individuals that I think are just amazing. I have been so lucky to connect with a variety of people on social media, some of which I know have already been on this podcast, like Nurse Gwenny. Nurse Dose podcast is also great. Sarah from Rapid Response RN podcast is awesome. There are some really awesome physicians out there as well. Nick from Palm Crit, Dr. Ibrahim from ICU OIED, I think, EDU, something like that. But, I'm just really thankful that there's a group of, and there are many others outside of that. These are just people that are kind of popping out in my head. But I'm very thankful that there's like a group of people that I know that are trying to just give education to help each other and the profession, which eventually is going to help our patients at the end of the day. And it's free, which is always helpful when it's on social media. So as far as the things that I'm getting into, I'm a busy girl. I have a lot of stuff that I'm working on. I will be having a special hemodynamics masterclass course that's going to be launching probably in the late spring. So be on the lookout for that. And some other things I'm going to keep on the download under lock and key. But if you are on my newsletter or stay connected with me, you'll be one of the first people to know, I'm sure. Other than that, you can always find me on all the social media things. And then if you're going to any conferences like NTI, if you're a nurse or critical care nurses, I will be doing a bunch of speaking opportunities there. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it.
That's awesome. And Sarah, what is your handle and how do we find you?
Yeah. So it's at ICU_nurse. But remember, it's not like ICU as in the unit. It's like I actually see you. So ISEEU_nurse. I'm on Instagram and TikTok and YouTube are probably my most active things that I do. And that's my website too, without the underscore. Without the underscore is my website. So,
okay, yeah. Perfect. Perfect. Thank you so much. What a phenomenal conversation it has been. I've really appreciated getting to know you and hearing your side. I love talking critical care. I I miss it sometimes, but sometimes I don't. Right now, charging in the ED is my bread and butter currently. So, what a great conversation. Thank you for coming out and spending the time with us on the 911 Nonsense podcast, and I can't wait to chat further with you.
Thanks, Sam. I really have enjoyed this conversation. It's been different than some other ones that I've been on, and it was fun to dive into some of the stories and the feelings that don't get to be, highlighted as much sometimes, but I think they're important conversations. So thank you for giving the space to allow it to happen.
You got it. Thank you. Have a good day, Sarah.
You too.
Thanks,
Bye.
bye. Thanks for tuning in. If you're enjoying the show and want to show your support, be sure to check out the Noon merch store on Bonfire. Find the link in the description below. Also, if you have any guest suggestions or if you're interested in being a guest on Noon yourself, visit the website at www.samspursuit.com to get in touch.